According to Matthew. Jesus left that place and went away to the district of Tyre and Sidon. Just then a Canaanite woman from the region came out and started shouting, "Have mercy on me, Lord, Son of David. My daughter is tormented by a demon." But he did not answer her at all. And his disciples came and urged him, saying, "Send her away, for she keeps shouting after us." He answered, "I was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel." But she came and knelt before him, saying, "Lord, help me." He answered, "It is not fair to take the children's food and throw it to the dogs." She said, "Yes, Lord. Yet even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from their master's table." Then Jesus answered her, "Woman, great is your faith. Let it be done for you as you wish." And her daughter was healed instantly. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, O Christ.
Please be seated. It was not Jesus' idea to get out of Israel and walk into the district of Tyre and Sidon. I mean, why would he do that? Why would he come up with an idea like that? First of all, it is over 20 miles out of his way, so 1.5, 2 days away by foot from the Sea of Galilee to the border of the district. Second, yet more importantly, the district of Tyre and Sidon is Gentile, not Jewish territory. It was the land of Israel's former enemies. Why would Jesus decide to go there? It just doesn't make sense, because in this story, we hear him say clearly that his focus is on what he believed to be his mission, that he was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. In today's gospel story, Jesus makes it disturbingly clear that he is not here for non-Jewish folk like this woman and her daughter. Yet Jesus is the one who has left Jewish territory and entered into this non-Jewish land. Interestingly, the next story in Scripture puts Jesus back in Jewish territory, in Galilee, right back from where he left, right back along the Sea of Galilee. Why this out-of-his-way excursion into Gentile territory? Well, again, I think it was not Jesus' idea to get out of Israel and walk all the way into the district of Tyre and Sidon. Why can I ask that, or why can I assume that? Well, according to Matthew's account of the gospel, following his baptism, Jesus was led by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. So that makes me think, if Jesus could be led by the Spirit that one time, could he not be led this time too? In fact, could we assume that Jesus was led by the Spirit much, if not all, of the time? Could Jesus have been led out of Israel and into Gentile territory so that God could take Jesus and, like that clarifying time, that 40 days and nights in the wilderness tempted by the devil, could God use this excursion into Gentile land to help Jesus clarify his calling? Could God be using this clarifying time with Jesus, who was thoroughly Jewish, remember, and thus it was natural for him to be focused on Israel alone? Could God not take him and move Jesus to a broader understanding of his mission? And could God use not only the Spirit to effect that change in Jesus, but also a woman, and a Canaanite woman at that? Yes, that's exactly what God is up to with this unexpected trip to Gentile lands. Our God is a God of scandalous surprises, after all. Even Jesus, I believe, is surprised. Jesus' encounter with the Canaanite woman began to erase boundaries which even Jesus observed. For you see, Jesus is simply espousing the cultural prejudice in which he was raised, a prejudice that limited God's salvation to Israel, forgetting, possibly, that God's salvation of Israel is in order that the whole world will be blessed and saved through Israel's ministry to and with the Gentile world. So the Canaanite woman's assertive but respectful dialogue with Jesus, her persistent faith and her willingness to be vulnerable, seeking to relate to Jesus where he was, converted him from one way of embracing the gospel to another. Yeah, you heard me right. Converted Jesus. The evidence that this may be so lies in the verses that follow today's gospel reading. Immediately following his conversation with the Canaanite woman, Jesus leaves the district of Tyre and Sidon, like I said, and returns to the Sea of Galilee. Once there, many people come to him, bringing people who needed healing. And the scriptures say they glorified the God of Israel. Now you see, since Jesus is back in Galilee of Israel, one would assume that all the people coming to him were Jewish, and there'd be no need to point out to the readers of Scripture that it was the God of Israel whom they worshiped. But Matthew goes out of his way to make the point that it is the God of Israel whom they glorified. Could that mean, then, that the crowd that met Jesus by the Sea of Galilee, bringing their sick and lame, and ultimately being fed with loaves and fishes, is not an exclusively Jewish crowd? Could it be that this crowd is also primarily made up of Gentiles? I think so. And this reference to the God of Israel as opposed to simply God is significant. It reveals that something has changed in Jesus and Jesus' mission. It reveals that this one-on-one encounter between the Canaanite woman and Jesus has erased a cultural, ethnic, religious boundary. And Jesus' perspective of his mission has been broadened. God is a God of all people, every race, every nation, every religion, every political party. Every person exists within God's inclusive reign. Under the reign of God's love, the boundaries which humanity draws, God will erase. Jesus' encounter with the Canaanite woman reveals to us that God is constantly crossing into new territory, unsettling and erasing boundaries. 1 week ago, we watched the horrible display of racism and hate as it developed in Charlottesville. We watched the violent clash of protesters and counter-protesters, a clash that led to the death of one young woman and injuries to many others. A clash that served to strengthen and shore up the boundary between these two ideologically opposed groups. At Charlottesville, no one in the clash was converted. No one was convinced to change their mind. No one crossed over the boundary to join the other side. More than likely, the opposite is true. People became even more entrenched. Violence elicited more violence. Hatred inspired more hatred. So if that's the context, if that's where we are, then what's the solution? What are we to do? As followers of Christ, members of the church, what are we to do in the face of such violence and hate? What would be a more excellent way to bring about reconciliation and peace? Many of you know this quote, but in his book, Strength to Love, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. writes this: "Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. Hate multiplies hate, violence multiplies violence, and toughness multiplies toughness in a descending spiral of destruction. The chain reaction of evil, hate begetting hate, wars producing more wars, must be broken, or we shall be plunged into the dark abyss of annihilation." The way of light and love, God's way, is a way of humility service, relationship, community. We see this way exemplified in today's gospel reading. The Canaanite woman is assertive but vulnerable, humble and respectful in her dialogue with Jesus, seeking to relate to Jesus where he was and to build a relationship with him that erases that boundary. In the case of Jesus, she loves him and appeals to his heart, and he is converted. We, the church, in the universal church, we could marshal our forces and attack anyone who uses hate as a weapon. We could spew our own hate and outrage. But to what end? To more hate and the shoring up of boundaries? No. Love is the still more excellent way. Just ask 58-year-old blues musician Daryl Davis. Davis, an African American, in his spare time for his hobby, befriends white supremacists. Lots of them, hundreds. He goes to where they live, meets them at their rallies, eats with them in their homes. He gets to know them. Davis, a Christian, has met with white supremacists for 3 decades. He never tries to convert the Klansmen. He simply becomes friends with them. And they give up the KKK on their own. Thomas Merton once wrote this: "The way of nonviolence is a way of love that seeks the salvation and redemption of the opponent, not his castigation, humiliation, and defeat." Susan Wright, who is the current president of Theology and Peace, writes this: "The experts on extremism are clear. You cannot convert members of extremist groups through argumentation or deprogramming or violence, or you must enter into relationship and build communities which welcome those who are different from you." Last Saturday in Charlottesville, according to Messiah's own Anna Hurley, who was there, she said there were also, beyond the clashing groups, there were also many different faith traditions represented, and it was beautiful. We know that they were gathered there to pray and build relationships. They were there to exhibit the power of friendship and love. They were there to seek to erase long-held boundaries of hate. And they were there knowing that in the end, hate will never, ever win. Love wins. God's scandalous, surprising, inclusive love wins. And it's this love that will change the world. Just ask Jesus. It changed him.